Lots happening in international affairs right now. Let's get some analysis with Professor Michael Wesley, as we do every week. He's the Deputy Vice-Chancellor International at the University of Melbourne. Professor Wesley, thank you as always. I want to start with Penny Wong's visit to the Pacific, her third in the month since the election, Michael Wesley, in New Zealand today, and then off to Honiara tomorrow, Professor Wesley.
Yeah, well, it shows just what a high priority this government is putting on the Pacific. Obviously, the shock of the agreement between China and Solomon Islands that happened really in the middle of the election campaign has really sharpened attention to the Pacific. And it's not only Australia's attention, it's also the United States, New Zealand, France, Britain, Japan. This is a full court press, and I think Senator Wong has been doing very well in the Pacific. I think her approach has been appreciated in the countries that she's been to, and she's got a big job ahead of her. There is no doubt that the Pacific is more contested now than it's been probably since the end of the Second World War.
And it has to be said, the more ambitious climate approach, as confirmed today by the Prime Minister with that formal declaration to the United Nations about the 43% target, that's going to go down a lot better and be warmly received by our neighbours in the Pacific. It's their number one issue, Michael Wesley.
Yeah, that's right. I think that the current government, which has a more ambitious climate policy, is certainly, being welcomed in the Pacific. But the fact is that, I think there are a lot of there's a lot of opinion in the Pacific that suggests that Australia should be doing more. That Australia should be more forward-leaning in ramping down particularly its fossil fuel exports. There's particular attention to our coal exports and our gas exports, particularly to North Asia. And the sharper critics of Australia, I think, will not be satisfied by the position of the new government and will be pushing Australia to do even more.
Yeah, indeed. And the interesting, sometimes I've seen some analysis that suggests, well, how does that stack up when China's one of the biggest emitters in the world? I think that loses sight of the fact that our Pacific neighbours have a great and much higher expectation on our behaviour as the most senior partner in the Pacific Islands Forum, and their neighbour and friend and family, as our leaders call it. Well, if that's the case, then there's got to be respect on those matters as well, don't there?
Yes, that's right. I mean, there is a tension in the Pacific to China being the largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world. And, there is a sense in which the critics of China are certainly very willing to point that out. But you're right, Australia, as the former Prime Minister used to say, sees itself as part of the Pacific family. It is a full member of the Pacific Islands Forum, unlike the United States, unlike China, unlike Japan. And so I think there is a sense that in the Pacific of saying, well, OK, if you're part of the family, then you should be highly responsive to what is an existential issue for us. And so I think those expectations of Australia will continue to be very high.
Yeah, judged by a different set of standards, absolutely. And I think that's what that other analysis misses completely. Let's finish with the China question, because we had at least the early signs of a possible rapprochement. The Defence Minister, a 1-hour meeting with his Chinese counterpart in Singapore.
Yeah, look, I think you would call it a first small step. I think there are probably back channels going at the moment, suggesting that there might be a more senior meeting, possibly when the Prime Minister is at either the East Asia Summit or APEC or something like that, with the Chinese Premier. But I think that there is a long way to go. Australia has signalled very clearly that we want to see the trade restrictions dropped, and there are a number of other preconditions, if you like, that Australia has put on the improvement of relations. So, look, a positive step, but a long way to go, Kieran.
Yeah, and I guess we got a reminder of that at the WTO with the Trade Minister, the new Trade Minister, Don Farrell, extended an olive branch, in his words, an invitation to meet. That wasn't taken up. So it shows that, everything's not completely resolved just yet.
No, that's right. And it shows, I think that particular incident shows that China is willing to continue to apply economic pressure to Australia. But really, I think China needs to realise that really its economic pressure hasn't had the effects that it thought it would, and probably should reconsider that particular line of its policy towards Australia. But you're right, there is a long way to go. This is going to be a complex process, and I don't know if anyone knows, either in China or Australia, what the new equilibrium in the relationship will end up being.
Professor Michael Wesley from the University of Melbourne, great to get your insights as always. Thanks.
Thanks, Kieran.